Today's video is sponsored by BetterHelp.com, and I've been with them for a long time. BetterHelp is an online platform where we found that you can effectively communicate with your therapist. Now, you begin by filling out a questionnaire, and then you'll be matched with a therapist within a couple of days. And if that match isn't ideal for you, you can certainly make an adjustment there. Now, you're going to be encouraged to journal, and also they have the availability for group therapy on a wide array of topics, and I really like that. So as the need exists, go ahead and take the necessary steps to get the help that you need. And just know that BetterHelp has a 4.5 rating on Trustpilot, so it indeed is a platform you can trust. There's a link below the video that will take you there. Hey, Team Healthy, I'm glad to be here with you for yet another episode of Unbound. This is the series where I'm fielding questions from you so that it allows me to speak into some topics that are of utmost importance that I might not do on some of the other videos. And so I really appreciate hearing from you and getting these particular questions and comments. And so if you have any, just go ahead and put them in the comment section below, and who knows, you may be a part of an upcoming episode here on Unbound. Now today, we're going to be talking about individuals who show strong signs of narcissism when you look back into their personal history and you think there's no particular reason that you need to be this way. And I'm going to just dive right in with these. I've got three different episodes here that I'm going to be looking at with three sets of questions, and then we're going to see if we can break this down. Now, this first person writes in and says, I continue to be baffled by a narcissist who has no good reason to be a narcissist, if that makes any sense. He had a good childhood from what I can tell. His family and friends are very decent people. How does someone like him become so selfish and contrarian? People want to love him, but he lets no one in. If you've ever been around someone like that, it's like, you don't need to be this way. And we're doing our best to try to show you some decency and goodness, and that person can more or less imply, well, you know what? I don't need your goodness. The only thing I need is me. And my cravings and my preferences, my desires go away and get out of my way. And it's like no matter what kind of healthy initiatives you try to throw in their direction, it's like, doesn't work. I'm not impressed. Or I have another one. And this one, my heart really goes out. This is from a very different angle from the parent of a narcissist. This person says, so many posts, meaning here on YouTube, are about someone surviving a narcissistic parent. Well, I'm the parent. My daughter has always been difficult since she was young, assuming the role of queen bee throughout her school career. She was always turning others against some poor victim. She was rude to me and acted very dismissive toward me. We have 3 other grown adult boys who are wonderful people. 2 years ago, my daughter, who's now 32, declared that we were abusive and has gone no contact with all of us. The entire family is baffled because she has such a deep history of cruelty. Now, this is one that's really burdensome because there are so many commentators out there that'll say, well, if an adult is narcissistic, they must have had some deep trauma in their own personal history, going back to mother and father and the setup that was there in the family. And of course, what that does, it can put some hard guilt on that parent, and they can say, come back if you had cameras that you could film. I promise you, I didn't scream, I didn't yell, I didn't shame. I did the best that I could. I tried to provide the right atmosphere. I don't know what happened, but it didn't play out with this one sibling. The others came out fine, and I promise I'm not that awful parent that just set the whole thing up. And my heart goes out to this person. All right, one more, and then we're going to get some comments. The next person says, I've been stuck in a loveless marriage for years, and I never understood why my love and care was not reciprocated. We had no heart bond. No matter what I did to make her happy, she was not interested. I was routinely subjected to devaluation, rejection, ignoring, silent treatment, rejection, ingratitude, lies, and sarcasm. She even made up humiliating stories based on fantasies, pretending it was real. And then he goes on to comment, I could never understand why my love never satisfied her. So in other words, again, here it's like, well, I'm in this very a pivotal role in her life, and I believe as best as I can say that I'm trying to be kind and loving and understanding, and I get all of this vitriol back. And yet I've had so many people in my office who were going through a breakup or a divorce, and there would be many people that would come to that person that would be sitting in my office saying, well, what did you do? Why couldn't you make this happen? And that person can say, well, I tried, I did my best. And then many people say, well, you're just in denial, when in fact, maybe that's not the case. What's going on here? Now, I'm going to bring up a truth, at least to me it's a truth, that a lot of folks don't particularly want to come to terms with, but nonetheless, here it is. I believe that every single human being on this planet right now has the capacity for narcissism. And it comes from my understanding of what we refer to as the duality. We are all capable of good and loving kinds of exchanges. We're each capable of negative and harmful kind of exchanges, to the point where it can go all the way down the spectrum toward evil. Each one of us has that capacity on the inside of us. The light versus the dark, if you will, and I refer to narcissism often as the dark side of the human personality. Go back into your own deep history. You may have had a great childhood. You may have had a terrible childhood, but you were prone, for example, to having moments of anger and harshness, and you can throw a temper tantrum, or you can just be unreasonable when you got ticked off, and your impatience can then turn into something much bigger than just that. There are times when you would be defensive. And if we look back, we could say, well, there was no real strong reason for you to be defensive, but there you were. There are times when you can have insecurities. There are times when you are judgmental. You've been judged. You pronounce judgment. Every one of us has those experiences, no matter how good or not good our background is. And it comes down to the fact that each person ultimately has the responsibility to say, I need to examine myself, and I need to take a hard look at the pluses and minuses that are a part of my life. And regardless of what the influences are, and they may have been very rough, I still need to take responsibility for who I am. And I know I've gone on record in saying that a relatively small percentage of individuals out there truly indulge analytical thinking in a way that they could or should. My percentage is about 20%. I say about 20% really do the hard work of introspecting and thinking about who they are and figuring out how they can improve. And some individuals don't, and not examining their life in a very deep kind of way, these small negatives that are a part of a person's life, impatience or irritabilities, can grow and expand. And we can't necessarily say, well, Mom, in this second person's case, it was your fault. Or spouse, you did it. You set the whole thing in motion. And there are people who will just say, well, I'm just going to go ahead and blame you. When in fact, it's like, no, there's something much bigger going on here. Every single individual has to have a hard examination. Now, my thing is, most of us don't like having to say, I have problems. I know that when I was a young adult, I didn't want anybody to think that I had problems or was inadequate, because you see, I was supposed to be the problem solver. And I wound up being in a profession where I felt like I had to be real careful about that. And I know, speaking on a personal level, there's pressure that comes along with that. There are other individuals, they think, well, I felt like my mother and my father had such wonderful relations with each other, and I couldn't live up to that. Or there are other people that will say, I looked at my peers and I just didn't particularly care for what they stood for, but I didn't really know how to handle the frustration. There are so many possibilities, and individuals don't really have the education and the form of processing, that it just doesn't come to fruition in terms of coming up with better alternatives. So I say all of this to say, when someone in your life proves to be strongly narcissistic, it's not all that helpful at times to say, well, we got to find somebody to pin this on. I think it's good for us to have an understanding of some of the broad patterns and possibilities and influences that have been there. So don't get me wrong, I don't think it's inappropriate to examine that. But when push comes to shove, it comes down to the fact that some people just don't want to examine themselves. And these can be people who, like is exhibited here or through these questions, who don't really have that strong of a negative influence from other individuals, and yet there they are. So it comes down to each one of us being willing to ask the question: who am I? What do I believe? What are my biggest negatives that I need to examine? What are my vulnerabilities that might take me in a direction that probably is not good for me or other individuals? And I'm willing to examine that. And then those who don't, they're the ones who are going to be vulnerable to having some of the negatives just run away with them, especially in moments of tension and conflict. So to that first person that says, well, I have this friend and I don't see any particular reason why they're being so selfish, to that mother who says, well, I did the best that I could and I felt like I provided a good atmosphere, to that husband who says, well, I tried to be appropriate, but it just wasn't reciprocated. Rather than saying, I have to take that blame on myself, I'm hoping you can turn it around and say, well, in my life, I am going to be a self-examining person. And when that narcissistic person says, well, I don't want to examine myself, I want to examine you, but not me, and they just go into blame, then it's like, well, then that's not somebody that I can have a close connection with. Self-examination, taking responsibility, analytical thinking is something that each one of us could go into, but many choose not to. But let's stay away from the blaming game. Instead, I'm hoping you can turn it around and say, what am I learning as a result of this? And I'm going to be the one who is approachable. And when that narcissistic person changes their mind and says, I want to join you, I'm going to be available and willing. But if not, I don't think that you need to carry the burden for your own difficulties and for everybody else's. Do the best you can, and then remember that person in front of you also has that same responsibility. Now, I hope that the questions and answers like this can give you some good things to think about. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. We're going to keep more coming in your direction. Just know that I have my sponsors, and one of them is BetterHelp.com. And when you're trying to deal with something like this, it's good to have somebody that you can talk it out with. We have a link below that will take you to their website, and I'm hoping that you'll find it to be very beneficial. Also, on my on my website, we have access to lots of resources. We have my courses, and they're very extensive. I talk in my course. Each course has at least 25 teaching videos and questions and things of that nature. We have courses on anger management, boundaries, finding out what the healthy personalities look like, finding out what the free you looks like. In addition, we also have my webinars, which are 90-minute PowerPoint presentations on a broad array of topics, along with many, when I say many, a lot of articles in my books. So we have lots of resources, and if you're in that growth and learning trajectory, perhaps you'll find those to be helpful too. So let's try to stay away from the blame game whenever we have these kinds of situations, with the idea that says, when I see these kind of situations that have been described here, I want to at least have my own sense of self-examination. And in doing so, you'll know, well, as best as I can, I want to be in a healthy kind of mode, so that if and when that narcissistic person wants to go into a space of self-examination, I'm ready and my reputation is intact. Be that kind of person. Who knows what's going to happen with that other person, but at least you'll know that you're in a place of steadiness, and that's the best that you can do.